Hello, listener, and welcome. Today, the road we are about to take is a bumpy one indeed. So please, buckle up and brace yourselves. Also, this road is not just a single path. There are twists and turns, so please be sure to tune in again. So, without any further interruption, written by aspiring author and great friend Leon Hamilton, I give you The Root of All Evil. Chapter 1. I guess I should start this off by saying I didn't have a choice. But that wouldn't be completely accurate. Technically, I could have rejected the offer, and my life would have continued on the path it was on. But, to be real with you, I wasn't doing great. My life was a mess, couldn't keep a job. I was suffering from depression and anxiety. I was barely functioning as a human being. Things were looking so dark at that point I thought about ending it all. I had just been released from yet another go-nowhere job and was at home one evening when I got a phone call. I put out a lot of applications online. At least 15 a day, so it wasn't abnormal for unknown numbers to show up on my phone. But this wasn't just any number. This call would be what got me where I am today, which is barricaded inside of a house with hostages, surrounded by police. And don't worry, the odds are in my favor. I have time to tell you all this. Let me begin. My name is Calvin Greer, and I've had horrible luck my entire life. I guess you could say it started at birth. My father, the prize-winning pig he was, had major, and I mean major, drug problems. I don't mean in and out of jail, typical junkie asshole dad shit here. This guy was robbing coke dealers and trading it for guns, which brought him right back to his drug of choice: money. Now I know what you're thinking. As addictions go, having a money addiction ain't that bad of a deal. That would be the case if you knew what to do with said money. This genius was a gambler and lost it all, putting himself so far in debt he could never get out. He owed hundreds of thousands to the type of people you don't want to owe a dime. They burnt our house down and took the insurance money, but that didn't even begin to cover what he owed. On top of that, he'd wronged a lot of people over the years, so the streets wanted him dead. Ultimately, he left us stranded in a homeless shelter and vanished for a while. My mother, God bless her, was a saint. She saved every penny and stacked every dime, working herself ragged till we were able to get into an apartment of our own. She did the best with what we had, and it worked out. Until it didn't. Times got hard. Hell, years got hard. But eventually, things got better. There was only one problem. However, Mama had an addiction to, no, not drugs or alcohol. And before you go getting all perverted, no, it wasn't sex either. She was addicted to my dad. She loved him so much, she would do whatever it took to find him. And that's exactly what she did. I was 10 when we found him, He had been shot and left for dead in Nevada. Pretty sure you can guess where. She saw his face on the news and we were at the hospital the next day. Flash forward 7 years, and the old man just couldn't help himself. Don't get me wrong, he tried. He held the job down for 3 or 4 years, before shit went crazy all over again. This time was different. I'm still not completely sure, but suddenly we came into a lot of money. I mean, millions. We had the big house on the hill, new cars, newest clothes. If you could buy it, we had it. And it was amazing. I was about to be 18 and lived my whole life up to that point dirt poor. To be millionaires literally overnight was mind-blowing. I didn't know how to act, so naturally I went a little wild. I won't weigh you down with all of that, but trust me, it was awesome. Exactly 4 years later, there was a knock at our front door. I don't think anyone was ready for what was on the other side of it. I swear, it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room when it opened. Standing in the doorway was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She was wearing one of those old-fashioned dresses that made her look like a living doll. Her skin was a weeping, discolored mess of prune-like flesh. Her eyes were oversized, protruding yellowish orbs that darted around the room, looking at all of us one by one. As bad as all of that was, the thing that really freaked me out was her hair. For some reason, it just unsettled me. It was done like one of those child beauty pageant contestants. Then, she spoke. Her voice was booming, and somehow ear-piercing at the same time. The sound of it sent waves of pain through my brain and brought me to my knees.
Your obligation has not been fulfilled. The contract is void. Your blood is now indebted.
I watched my father being dragged across the room by things I couldn't see. He screamed and fought as much as he could, until he was floating in the air just a few feet from where that thing was standing in the doorway. She raised one hand and made a fist. My father's body crumpled like a piece of paper. I could hear his bones snapping and crunching under the pressure, and with one last flick of her wrist, it was over. His body shredded apart and coated the room with his blood. My mother died right there from a heart attack in the living room. Suddenly I was alone, and as I found out a few days later, back to being dirt poor. Not a penny to my name, outside of whatever cash assets I had on hand, or hidden away, which wasn't much. My life took a downward spiral after that. Therapy and medication left me in this weird funk that kept me out of focus, kind of just stumbling through life. Getting through the next few years would be tough. I bounced around for a while till I was able to land a job at the airport, cleaning rental cars. From there, I got an apartment, but that didn't last. The company sold its contract, and the new owners didn't want any convicted felons working for them. Oh, the felony thing is just one of those details I fast-forwarded through because it's a horrible story. In any case, after that I was living in my car for a while, until it got stolen one night while I was working through a temp service. There's a few more ups and downs, but I'm sure you get the point by now. I'd hit rock bottom. There was an eviction notice on my door, and no sign of a dime rolling my way. Then, my phone rang. An almost familiar-sounding voice snapped me out of my daze.
Hello, Hello, Mr. Greer. We recently reviewed your application and would like to offer you a job.
After a brief conversation, I agreed to the terms of the contract, and I was told someone would be here to pick me up the next morning. I don't think I slept a wink that night, and by 6 a.m., someone was knocking at my door. Opening it, I was greeted by a short old man with a bulging potbelly and long gray hair. He looked me over and grunted to himself before gruffly asking, "Are you Calvin Greer?" Once I assured him I was, we were off. The old man turned out to be a talker. He started chatting me up once we were on the road. "So, Cal, if you don't mind me asking, you ever done one of these before?" Judging by the lingering aroma of weed in the van, I could tell this was going to be a fun ride. Before I could respond, he dug in his shirt pocket and pulled out a thumb-thick spliff that seemed to fog up the van as soon as he lit it. "The name's Teddy, by the way. You smoke?" he asked, passing it to me. Smiling to myself, I grabbed it and took a hit. Holding it in for a few seconds, I noticed the taste was almost sweet. It coated my mouth with a citrus flavor that reminded me of grapefruit. Choking and exhaling, I chuckled and passed it back. "Wow, that's good. But what do you mean, done one of these? I thought this was a job." Teddy laughed at me before taking another long pull. "Oh, there's a job all right, just not the kind you're thinking of." Passing me the blunt, he exhaled a cloud and chuckled. "I'll tell you like I tell everyone else who tries this. In the end, no one wins. Just take the money and shut the fuck up. It's not worth it." I don't know if it was the weed or what, but Teddy had a real odd way of talking a lot without saying much. Taking another good hit, glancing out of the window for a second, I realized we weren't in the city anymore. But there was no way we had come that far this fast. My head started spinning, and suddenly I could hear Teddy's voice telling me to wake up. Rubbing my eyes and sitting up, I see Teddy outside the van, about to open my door. "That shit's not for beginners. Probably should have warned you, but no harm, no foul. We're here safe and sound. But good luck, bro. Just remember what I told you, and hopefully I'll see you for the trip home." Getting out of the van, I found myself looking at a nice little 2-story house. The walls were made brick that had been painted a deep green that nearly matched the surrounding area. There were 6 other houses on the street, each identical in build, but painted different colors: gray, yellow, red, blue, white, and black. Somehow the entire day had passed. It was dark now, and I could see lights on in all the houses. On the mailbox to my left, I noticed my name on a white envelope taped to it. As Teddy honked his horn and drove away, I grabbed the envelope. Inside was a letter that read, "Hello, Mr. Greer. The house you see in front of you will be your home for the next 365 days. In this time, you will be compensated $5,000 weekly for the duration of the job. Food, clothing, and shelter are provided. There will be scheduled events that take place weekly at first and becoming daily as time goes on. You are free to opt out at any point, terminating the contract and forfeiting your compensation. That money will be divided by the remaining participants. You will have limited access to internet and cable television, as well as the freedom to move around in the area. You will not be allowed off the property until you either opt out or finish the job." The only other thing in the envelope was a pair of keys. Walking up to the front door, I noticed there was a number painted on the frame: 70. Stepping inside, my jaw dropped. Everything was identical to the house my parents died in. Slowly backing out into the yard, I stood there, staring at the house. There was no way this was happening. That house was at least 3 times the size, and yet, when I looked inside, it was all there. I should have opted out right then and there. God knows I thought about it. But it would mean that I would be going back to nothing. I needed that money. Patting my pockets for my cigarettes, I found what was left of the blunt Teddy was smoking, and a note with STFU written on it. I laughed and grabbed my smokes and realized I didn't have a lighter. Huh. Great. Going back inside that house was a goddamn nightmare come true. When I closed the door, I could have sworn for a split second the knob was covered in blood. But as I glanced down at my palm, there was nothing there. I could smell my mother's perfume hanging in the air. Flashbacks of pool parties and wild nights in the town flooded my mind for a moment. Followed by that horrible wet sound I spent years trying to forget. It was coming from behind me, the wet crunching of bone shattering, tearing through flesh, and the wheezing gasps for air. Out of reflex, I spun around to see an empty room. Everything was gone. I wasn't in that house anymore. The floors were a dark polished wood now, and the walls were a sandy tan. In the room to my right was a large leather sectional sofa, positioned around a huge flat-screen television. To my left, another room that led to the kitchen. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, with a game room, decked out with every video game I could think of, and a few I'd never heard of. This place was fantastic. And when I found the bar, I forgot all about the weird flashbacks and poured myself a drink. Looking around the place, I found a closet in the master bedroom filled with brand new clothes and shoes, all in my size. Walking around, getting a feel for the house, I kept looking for cameras, but I never found any. After an hour or so of looking through everything, there was a knock at the door. I didn't say a word. As quickly as I could, I made my way to the door, just in time for whoever it was to knock again. Looking through the peephole, I see a tall, thin woman with medium-length brown hair and glasses. Who is it? I barked out, still watching. She stepped back, slightly surprised, and smiled.
I'm Paula from the Blue House. I saw you getting dropped off and thought I'd come say hello before the others show up.
When I finally opened the door, Paula smiled and held out her hand to shake. There was something odd about her, and not in a cute, quirky way either. Something about the look in her eye was unsettling. Not trying to be rude, I shook her hand and invited her inside. She stepped through the doorway and paused, looking around the house, smiling to herself before speaking excitedly. I knew it. All the other houses are completely different. Looks like you got the best one. Do you know anything about the job? Something about her made me laugh a little. No, not really. I'm Calvin, by the way. She smiled, still looking around, until she spotted the bar. The smile vanished, and she looked me straight in the eyes. Can I please have a drink? Something about her sudden mood change felt genuine. Sure, help yourself. Before I could finish talking, she was headed for the bar. Picking through the bottles, she raised up an untapped bottle of Maker's Mark, kissed it before peeling away the wax and pouring a cup. I watched her sniff the drink, breathing it in for a second, with her eyes closed before finally taking that first sip. Holy shit. Oh my god, that's so good. I thought I'd have to go a whole year without it. Thank you so much.
I've been here a whole month now. No one has alcohol. If I were you, I wouldn't tell anyone about this. Those guys will be here every single day trying to leech off you until you're dry.
She smiled, taking another sip. I hadn't noticed till then that she was covered in tattoos from her neck to her knuckles. And she was gorgeous. Look, Paula, is it? Can you please tell me what the hell's going on here? I mean, what are we getting paid to do exactly? She took another sip, then refilled her cup. Walking towards the door, she paused and smiled at me again.
Live? Not to be cryptic or anything, but that's what they want you to do as far as I can tell. Stay here for a year, and they'll pay you to do it. I'm not sure why. Fred from the Black House says it's some sort of a game. I'm not sure I believe that, though. If you ask me, I think it's an experiment. Who knows? Who cares? In the end, we all get a big fat check, and it's back to the real world.
Finishing her drink, she thanked me for it, and then left. I spent the rest of the night smoking, playing video games until I fell asleep. When I woke up, I could hear people talking, and the sun was up. Getting up and going downstairs, I could make out two voices coming from just outside the front door. A man and a woman were arguing back and forth about what they should have brought. Shaking my head, I didn't bother asking who it was. I just opened the door, catching them both off guard.
Oh, hello. I'm Christine, and this is Glenn. We're from the Yellow House. You wouldn't happen to have seen our son Eli around here, have you? He's been snooping around this place since you got here, and we didn't want him surprising you.
I told them I hadn't seen anyone except Paula, and they both gave me an odd look. Then Glenn leaned towards me and uttered under his breath,
"People like her are dangerous. I'd watch it around her if I were you."
With that, they walked away, talking to one another. An hour later, I stepped outside for some air. Saw a big white van in the middle of the street. There was a speaker mounted on the top, and almost as soon as I noticed it, a voice boomed out from it.
Today's event will take place in 3 minutes. You must remain inside your homes for the next 72 hours. If you fail to do so, you will be penalized. Today's event is worth $5,000. Good luck.
A timer started counting down over the speaker. I stood there, watching the curtains being closed in every house. Not knowing what was about to happen, I rushed inside and watched through the window. When the timer hit 0, I was expecting some amazing spectacle, but nothing happened. At least, not at first. Eventually, the air around me started to warm up. It was barely noticeable at first, but after 45 minutes I was dripping sweat. After 2 hours, I thought I might pass out. It got so hot I could see heat waves in the air. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, there was a loud metallic clank, and cold air came pouring through the vents. This went on for the entire first day, and by nightfall I was starting to regret doing this. The temperature finally stabilized at 70 degrees, and stayed there for the rest of the night. Around 2 in the morning, I started to hear someone running through the house. What the fuck? I lay there in bed, listening to whoever it was, right up until I heard them racing up the stairs. I rolled out of bed and rushed into the hall, and froze in place. Standing at the top of the stairs was that horrible thing I'd seen kill my parents. Its sickly, bulbous yellow eyes locked onto me, as its mouth stretched open, releasing a swarm of what I thought were flies at first, until one of them landed on my arm and bit into me. It looked like a tiny person with wings and an oversized mouth. Its skin, or maybe scales, who knows, was a reflective greenish black, and when I say those little fuckers pack a punch, the bite took a chunk of flesh. The bastards were trying to eat me. I swatted one and then another and another, but the hallway was filling up with them. I turned and bolted back into my room, slamming the door shut, then jamming everything I could get my hands on into the cracks to keep them out. That worked for a few seconds, then they started coming through the vents. Rushing to the bathroom, I closed myself inside and started filling the tub with water, while I frantically searched for anything I could use to swat them away. I could hear them buzzing outside the door. The sound was so loud there had to be thousands of them. Spotting a straw on the floor, I remembered an old cartoon and prayed it worked. I scooped it up and dove into the tub, submerging myself completely underwater and breathing through the straw. I hoped they wouldn't go near it. The door burst open, and those things blotted out the light. It was suddenly pitch black in there, but the straw was working. After a few minutes, they fluttered away, and I sat up relieved, gasping and wiping water out of my eyes. I heard the worst sound I think I've ever heard in my life in that moment. A girlish giggle coming from the doorway. Slowly turning, I saw her, that same horrible little wrinkled wretch of a creature, grinning up at me. Her oversized mouth filled with protruding half-rotted teeth. She lunged at me in the blink of an eye, and I jolted back, slamming my head into the wall and slipping in the tub. The second I got my balance, she was gone. I sat there, the back of my head stinging, fully clothed, sitting in a tub of water. No sign of the bugs. Or the girl. Once I had on some dry clothes and was sure the house was empty, I tried to get something to eat. In the hall leading to the stairs, there's a floor-to-ceiling mirror. I hadn't paid much attention to it until I walked past it. There was something wrong with my reflection. Tiny differences, like the scar on my cheek wasn't there, and my hair seemed darker, but I wrote it off and headed for the kitchen. I stood there looking through the fridge and came up with a sandwich and a cold beer, then sat down to watch a movie. About halfway through, I started to hear a tapping sound come from the window. As long as it wasn't that girl, I thought I could deal with it. I was so wrong. Yanking back the curtain revealed something I wish I could erase from my brain. What I can only describe as a shaved ape was pressing its greasy, splotchy pink naked body against the glass. And that tapping sound I mentioned, let's just say you don't want to know. Upon realizing it had been spotted, this horrendous-looking freak let out a pig squeal and detached itself from the glass, leaving an ogre-shaped wet spot in its wake. I'd stood there staring in at me. It didn't seem to have a neck, and its eyes were these big black orbs that were so far apart they were nearly on the sides of its head. Its mouth, if you could call it that, was abnormally wide, and drooped in the corners, releasing a river of what I hoped was just spit. The rest of its body looked like it was made of chicken skin. It hobbled around, making that pig noise for a few seconds before it shambled off, vanishing into the woods. Jesus fucking Christ, what the fuck was that? Oh, please tell me it wasn't doing what I think it was doing, I said to myself, shaking my head. I didn't look out of a window for the rest of the night. The next morning rolled in, and I couldn't have been happier. Walking down the stairs, I was hit by a smell that instantly made me gag. The only thing I could compare it to was a septic tank filled with roadkill. The stench was so thick, I swear I tasted it. Looking around the house, everything was clean. I searched for close to an hour and couldn't find where it was coming from. The smell was so bad it killed my appetite, so I just sat there on the couch covering my nose till it finally went away. There was no rule against opening a window for air, but the second I did, I regretted it. An ear-piercing alarm sounded, and every light in the house started flashing until I closed it. I did my best to move on with my day, watching movies and playing games occasionally, cleaning up just to pass the time. Then I caught something moving out of the corner of my eye. At first glance, I thought it was a rat. I would catch glimpses of them from time to time, throughout the day, but never got a good look at one until I went to the bathroom. I was standing there doing my business when I heard bubbling coming from the toilet. Glancing down, I saw a pair of eyes looking up at me from the drain. I was midstream. There was no stopping now, so I didn't. I almost laughed at it until it came flying out of the toilet, chomping at a needless-to-say sensitive area. Now, I don't know about you guys, but having some weird toilet goblin thing attacking my junk wasn't high on my list of life goals. I pissed all over the place trying to get back, and when that thing landed on the floor in front of me, I nearly lost it. The creature didn't look anything like a rat. It was a lot closer to a deformed, hairy spider with the biggest fangs I'd ever seen in my life. It made this clicking sound that made my eyes water, and it reeked of that foul stench that flooded the house earlier in the day. It moved incredibly fast, crossing the floor between us in seconds. I did the only thing I could think of, and kicked it as hard as I could, sending it flying through the air and splattering against the wall. Before I could celebrate my small victory, searing pain surged through my foot. The same foot I kicked the thing with was now covered in tiny brown and black quills that were pulsing and pumping some sort of toxin into me. Holy shit! I screamed as the pain intensified. Without thinking, I snatched out as many of the quills as I could, only to have a few of them lodge themselves into my fingers and palm. This was an insane situation, and it was about to get a lot worse. As soon as I felt my blood surge from the toxin, the bathroom walls started to ripple like waves across a pond as they shifted between a calming white to a neon green that melted away. I could feel the inside of my skull rubbing against my brain. My eyes felt itchy and dry, while my tongue seemed to swell, causing me to drool uncontrollably. I couldn't feel my legs, but I could feel myself walking, maybe floating through the house. An overwhelming wave of panic washed over me as I stopped in front of the mirror. I watched in complete terror as my own reflection tore itself apart, devouring itself only to be regurgitated, then repeat the process. I felt bile rush up the back of my throat, and my stomach cramped as I heaved, spewing a wiggling mass of snake-like creatures with human faces that cried out as they splattered on the floor and quickly began to slither away. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a garbled mashup of words that made no sense. There was an intense growling that got closer and vibrated through me. My body moved faster than I thought possible, nearly giving me whiplash as I raced down the hall and into my room, slamming the door closed behind me. I could see myself bracing against the door, but it was almost as if I was outside of my own body, watching this happen to someone else. The door quaked, and the wall shook from the impact of this hellhound that was slamming into it. Just as the wood splintered and exploded, sending me flying across the room. Then everything stopped. I was hanging in mid-air, seconds from slamming into the wall. I could hear the ocean, or at least that's what I thought it was. Shifting my attention to the wall, I saw the wall rippling just like it was in the restroom, only it wasn't changing to a neon green. Instead, it had a reflective surface, and the instant I locked eyes with myself, time went back to normal. I splashed through the wall, winding up downstairs on the sofa in front of the TV. For a split second, I thought it all had been in my head. Right up until I saw one of those toilet spider goblin things watching me from the hallway. It scrambled away, making that stupid, irritating clicking sound, and I tried getting up off the sofa. Now, any sane person probably would have called it quits after all of that. But I had nothing to lose. Without this job or whatever, I was homeless. The lingering pain in my foot stuck around for most of the day. Things didn't pick back up until late in the afternoon. I was lighting a cigarette on the stove when I saw something that shouldn't be there. It was a door. I had been over every inch of the house, and that door wasn't there before. I may be a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Well, maybe. I didn't care what was behind that door, though, and I wasn't going to find out. I got my smoke lit, then turned off the burner and limped back to the living room. I turned on the television. I wanted to check the channels. I was searching for something to veg out on, but there were only movie channels and there were no news stations or any local broadcast. I noticed there was an aux channel, and I decided to check it. It was a live feed from the yellow house. I could clearly see Glenn sitting at the kitchen table, talking to a young boy who I figured had to be Eli. There was no sound, but the conversation looked intense. Glenn was banging his hand on the table, and judging by his movements, I'd say he was probably yelling. The boy didn't look as if he were paying attention to anything he was talking about, and after a few minutes, he threw up his hands and stormed out. Christine walked in a few seconds later, and the camera switched to Eli. He was in his room, searching for something. After a quick search, he pulled something from under his bed. His back was to the camera, so I couldn't get a look at what he was doing. But he turned and looked directly into the camera, and held up a white sheet of paper with "Help Me" written on it. The feed switched again, back to the kitchen, but Christine and Glenn were nowhere to be found. The feed started switching between rooms, looking for them until they were spotted in the main room. They were both kneeling in front of a man I hadn't seen before. He was short and thin with a bald head. For some reason, I couldn't see his face. Everything else was clear and visible on the screen, but when I tried to focus on him, it almost looked like he didn't even have a face. Just a blank surface, with 2 black dots for eyes. He handed Christine a knife, then motioned to Glenn. She rose to her feet and stood there looking down at him. I almost couldn't watch what happened next. Glenn tilted his head back, and she carved something into his forehead. Then, when she was finished, she handed the knife to him, and he repeated the process on her. The screen flickered, and the man was gone. They then both flew into a rage and started wrecking the room. The camera switched back to Eli's room. He'd barricaded himself in there and was trying to get the window open. I watched him trying everything he could think of to shatter the glass, but it wouldn't break. In a matter of seconds, his parents were banging on the door. It didn't take long for them to force their way in. Christine was the first one in. She rushed him. Eli did everything he could to dodge her, but when Glenn got involved, there was nothing he could do. Glenn pinned him to the ground, while Christine stabbed him over and over. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. I watched in total disbelief as they tore their only child apart and ate him. When they were done, they stripped out of their clothes and had sex in his shredded remains. The feed stopped there. I didn't know what to do. I paced around, contemplating opting out when I remembered the phone in the kitchen. It was one of those old-school rotary phones, but there was only one number on it. 7. Picking it up and dialing, I stood there waiting. It seemed to take forever, but eventually someone responded.
Hello, Mr. Greer. How may we assist you?
For a second, I didn't know what to say. My mind went blank, and when the voice called out again, I snapped out of it. Something just happened at the Yellow House. You need to get someone over there right now. There was a long pause, and I could hear typing over the phone. After a second, the voice spoke again.
We have noted your participation. Thank you for reporting. Can we help you with anything else?
Help me with anything else? Are you listening to me? I just watched those people kill their son. You need to send someone there right now. There was another long pause before the voice responded.
We are aware of the situation, Mr. Greer. Thank you for your concern. Have a nice evening.
The line went dead, and I was left with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Hanging it up, I walked to the bar and poured a drink. Nothing happened that night. Well, almost nothing. Around midnight, I could have sworn I saw my reflection watching me from the bathroom mirror. It was only for a split second, but I know what I saw. The next morning was quiet, and I avoided the television, played video games all day, hoping I could just make it through. No such luck. I heard a crash from downstairs. I dropped the controller and jolted to my feet, rushed to get a look. I moved slowly, listening for any signs of someone in the house. When I got to the kitchen, I found the mystery door had been opened, and the fridge had been raided. I grabbed the biggest knife I could find and started searching the house again. But before I did, I shut that door and moved the table in front of it. I looked everywhere I could think of and came up empty. Walking back up the stairs, I heard another crash from the kitchen, followed by a low grunting. I spun around to see that necklace, shaved, ape-naked frogman-looking fucker come charging out through the hall. It stopped at the bottom of the stairs, making that gut-churning, grunting sound while licking its lips and staring at me. The first thought through my mind was this thing was about to eat me. Then it did something that let me know its plans were so much worse. It started humping the air and grunting as its junk scraped the floor, leaving a snail trail. I wanted to puke, but I kept it down and got up the stairs quickly as I could. The grunting turned into that high-pitched squeal, and it came thundering up after me. As I raced past the mirror, I felt a pair of hands grab me and literally snatch me off my feet. A freezing cold shockwave of pain rolled through my body, and my tongue went numb. I couldn't see for a moment, but I had to get up. That thing would be on me if I didn't. Staggering and stumbling, I got to my feet just as my vision cleared. A loud thump from behind me made me flinch, and I turned to see that creature pressing itself against the glass.
Where am I? Where am I?
As I uttered those words, they echoed and amplified till they were so loud it gave me a splitting headache. When the echo finally faded, I realized I was still in the same house, but everything was opposite. I'd gone through the mirror. It's not as cool as it sounds. It's actually pretty fucking horrible if you ask me. The mirror doesn't reflect the whole house, so I was trapped in this small section of the hallway, with an empty, unending darkness on either side of me. And I wasn't alone. It started as whispers, echoing in from somewhere out there in the pitch black. Then it was a shadow that would pass through the hall at high speeds, knocking me over every single time. Then it showed itself. I halfway expected to see a mirror version of myself, and honestly, I would have preferred that. Its body was constantly changing. One second it would be the size of a child, the next an adult, shifting between male and female. It only said 2 words.
Be still.
Then it was gone. I can't begin to tell you how long I was standing there, but eventually the creature left and the mirror thing came back to throw me back through the reflection. When I hit the ground on the opposite side, I didn't waste a second thinking about it. I rushed down to the kitchen, found a hammer and nails, then made sure the mystery door would never open again. When the 72 hours were finally over, the kitchen phone rang, and I was told I could leave the house now. The first thing I did was step out the front door and breathe as deeply as my lungs would allow me. I couldn't help but stare at the yellow house, waiting for Christine and Glenn to step outside. But they never did. After a few minutes, I saw Paula headed towards me, with a huge smile on her face.
Hey, Cal. How was your first event? Anything good happen?
I didn't know what to say. Shaking my head and chuckling to myself, I looked around at the street. Did you see what Christine and Glenn did to Eli? Paula stepped back and gave me an odd look.
No. How would I have seen that? What are you talking about?
I told her what I had seen on the aux channel, and she didn't believe me. I thought she would change her mind if I showed her the channel, but I'd forgotten the feed went dead, so when I tried showing her, it was just static-filled screen with aux at the top right corner. After that, I didn't want to tell her anything else that happened. It would just make me look insane. She smiled at me and touched my shoulder.
Look, Cal, I know the first days here, kinda weird, but you should really try to get some rest. Staying up all night isn't going to be good for you.
She gave me a smile one last time and headed out. I didn't think about it until she'd left, but how did she know I had been staying up all night? Had she known all along about the channel? Was she watching me? Paranoia is a hell of a thing. I spent the rest of the day looking for cameras. Maybe I had missed them the first time around, but after a thorough search, I didn't find a single thing. There wasn't another event for days. Then on a Thursday morning, the white van was back. The speaker crackled to life, and the announcement was made.
For the next 168 hours, you are to stay inside your homes. This event begins in 5 minutes. This will be a group event. Will the white and blue sectors please report to the green sector? The black and gray sectors are to report to the red sector, and the yellow sector is in isolation. You now have 4 minutes. This event will be triple pay for the week. Phones will be disabled, and there will be one food delivery midweek. Good luck.
As soon as the announcement was over, there was a knock at the door. While I wasn't looking forward to another event, I was more than happy to have people with me at least. At least, I wouldn't have to go through it all alone. Opening the door, I saw Paula standing there with a tall guy that looked like a Duck Dynasty reject. He smiled a big goofy smile and extended his hand. "The name's Jack. Looks like we're gonna be roomies for a while. I claim the sofa." I could see Paula rolling her eyes as Jack let go of my hand and found his way over to the sofa area. She smiled and gave me a hug. "Don't mind him, he's an idiot," she whispered in my ear, stepping past me, rushing upstairs to find a bedroom. Jack called out to me as soon as the door slammed shut. "Hey, green guy, where's the toilet? Gotta take a mean one." I looked over to see him at the bar, pouring himself a scotch and looking around the room. When I told him where it was, he took his drink and hurried off. A few seconds later, Paula came back downstairs with a big smile on her face. "Jesus, Cal, who'd you have to screw to get this house? The blue sector's a dump compared to this place." As she walked past me and headed for the kitchen, I couldn't help but notice something was different about her. She wasn't thin like before. Somehow in a week she'd become curvaceous in all the right places, making it hard to keep my eyes off of her. Once she disappeared around the corner, Jack's voice startled me out of my gaze. "So, what's the issue here, Greenie? What's wrong with the place?" Turning to face him, I spotted him back at the bar, refilling his drink. Before I could respond, Paula stepped up behind me and whispered in my ear, "Have a drink with me." Jack looked at the two of us, then smirked, and took a seat on his sofa. While the timer counted down the final seconds before the event, I watched her pouring our drinks. As she handed mine to me, Jack stood up and raised his glass. "Here's to you, Greenie. Shit's about to get weird."